Good morning and welcome to the Breakfast Rundown with me, Zulfick Farzan, where we discuss stories making headlines here at home and also what's happening overseas that would have an impact on Sri Lanka. Well, starting off, the Ministry of Power and Energy has announced the appointment of a committee to review various renewable energy projects that have been agreed upon in recent times. Professor Udhyanga Hemapala, the secretary to the ministry, stated that the committee will review approximately 40 wind and solar power projects, including the Mana wind power project. These projects are expected to generate between 5 to 100 megawatts of power. Professor Hemapala highlighted that some agreements made under these projects have been found to be disadvantageous to the country. Additionally, he noted that certain land selected for these projects could be more productively used for agricultural purposes. The committee will also evaluate the cost per unit of electricity purchased from these projects and the economic benefits they bring. Members of the committee have been instructed to submit their report within a month. Upon receiving the report, the ministry aims to reach a consensus on implementing these projects in a manner that is most beneficial and advantageous to the country. Now, at the same time, the Ceylon Electricity Board said that it has submitted to the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka the proposal to reduce the electricity tariffs. According to the CEB, the proposal has been formulated based on the existing pricing formula. The PUCSL will review the proposal and then, upon approval, will announce the percentage reductions in electricity tariffs. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Power and Energy has said that the President will appoint new members to fill the vacancies in the PUCSL. This marks the third time this year that the CEB has submitted a proposal to reduce the electricity tariffs. Sri Lanka is currently under a program by the International Monetary Fund. This is the extended fund facility that spans across 48 months. Sri Lanka is up for the third review of this program. Now, according to Krishna Srinivasan, the director of the Asia Pacific Department at the IMF, the third review will take place soon. Now, yesterday, at the IMF and World Bank Group annual meetings in Washington, D.C., the IMF's Asia and Pacific Department convened a media briefing to give updates on the region. And in this update, questions also raised on Sri Lanka. The International Monetary Fund has said that debt restructuring is not the end of the road for the country and that more needs to be done in terms of continuing with the reforms. Now, Krishna Srinivasan said that there is also a consensus from the new government that they would safeguard and build on the hard-won gains under the program.
Sri Lanka is currently on a IMF-supported program for 48 months. Is the IMF having any long-term support program for Sri Lanka, given that the debt restructuring is also in its final stages? And just 48 hours ago at the Group of 24 press briefing, we had the director of G24 saying that countries like Sri Lanka, the middle-income countries, should also have something similar to a common framework, and there should be timely debt reduction measures also in place. What is the IMF's position on these two aspects? Thank you.
Thank you. Quite a few questions. Let me try to answer all of them. So, when the new government took office not too long ago, I led a high-level team to Colombo to discuss to engage with the authorities. And we had some very, very productive discussions with the new government and the team there. And the discussions are continuing this week during the annual meetings. Now, there was broad consensus, I would say unanimous consensus, that Sri Lanka, which was staring at the abyss in 2022, has come a long way in terms of undertaking reforms which have led to some hard-won gains. As you'll note that growth has been positive the last 4 quarters, inflation is coming down. So there was consensus that the new government, from the new government, that they would like to safeguard and build on the hard-won gains under the program. Now, under the program, we have elements which address some of the priorities of the new government, including in terms of social protection and so on. But the details on the program are continuing, and they'll be happening this week in Washington. And we are encouraged by what we've heard so far, and hoping that we can move fast with the towards the third review, which will come up soon. Now, in terms of there was a question on the debt restructuring. They have reached agreements with the official creditors, and they've reached an agreement in principle with the private creditors. The next step would be to reach a formal agreement with all creditors, and that's a big step forward. And of course, that's not the end. There's a lot more work to be done in terms of continuing with the reforms, because there's a long way to go before you're on a path of strong and sustainable recovery. In terms of the macro-linked bonds, this is something which is a negotiation between the country's creditors, the country's advisors, and the creditors. We don't get involved in the kind of instruments that they negotiate on, and so on and so forth. What we are concerned about is whether these instruments and the restructuring they reach are one that consistent with our program targets on debt and so on, and that there's comparability of treatment across creditors. So that's something which the country works on. Now, you're right that these macro-linked bonds have become popular, and so it all depends country to country how the creditors and advisors go about it.
That was Krishna Srinivasan, the director of the IMF's Asia and Pacific Department. Now, at the same time, Kristalina Georgieva, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, has emphasized the need for decisive action on inflation, debt and pro-growth reforms to steer the global economy through the current challenges.
First, ensure that inflation gets back to target everywhere. Major central banks, including in the US, have rightly embarked on an easing path. The trick now is to finish the job on inflation without unnecessarily damaging the job market. Second, now is the time to act on debt and deficits. After years of much needed fiscal support in response to shocks, now is the time to rebuild fiscal buffers. In most countries, that can be done gradually, but it needs to start now. Third, and most important, it is crucial that countries carry out pro-growth reforms. From cutting red tape to improving governance, we have seen reforms being a source of significant benefits across countries. Our analysis shows that these reforms can boost output by up to 8% over 4 years in developing countries.
Shifting focus to global fiscal policy, Georgieva stressed that countries must act now to address debt and deficit following years of fiscal stimulus in response to economic shocks.
On debt, we are making progress under the G20 common framework to speed up debt restructurings. A global sovereign debt roundtable that met yesterday is helping to make the process more predictable and efficient. But we need to do more to help countries in debt distress get back on their feet faster. Many of our members still face high interest rates and high debt servicing costs. Not unsustainable debt, but significant liquidity problems. And this is why, jointly with the World Bank, we are proposing a three-pillar response, combining reforms to boost growth and mobilize domestic resources, adequate financing, including from international financial institutions, and crowding in private finance. And finally, on trade, it is important to protect the gains from economic integration while ensuring they are widely shared. We know that globalization has not delivered for everyone, and we must attend to the needs of those who have lost out. And at the same time, we must ensure that trade remains an engine of global growth, especially for developing countries. They have so much more to lose if we fracture the global economy. At the IMF, we are, as always, deeply committed to serving our members so they navigate these challenging times. We will do so through our analysis and policy advice. It helps policymakers to understand the costs and benefits of policy choices. And we will continue to use our financial resources to act as a buffer for our members in need. 97 countries, highest in our history, have benefited from our lending since the pandemic, the majority through multi-year programs. During the same period, our concessional loans have tripled. Interest in the Resilience and Sustainability Facility continues to grow. We have 20 countries now using the facility to enhance their climate resilience, almost double the number when we met a year ago.
On the final day of the BRICS summit in Kazan, something interesting caught the eyes of international journalists and everyone else who was present for the BRICS Outreach and BRICS Plus summit. It was a one-on-one between whom? Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Chinese President Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin were seen having a one-on-one conversation during the BRICS Plus Outreach Summit meeting in Kazan. Now, footage shows the two leaders with their heads close together speaking through an interpreter. And international media is now speculating what they were talking. World leaders from more than 20 countries with delegations from over 30 nations, including Sri Lanka, attended one of the major economic, political and cultural events of the decade. Now, on Wednesday, the BRICS leaders signed the Kazan Declaration, held many bilateral meetings and attended a gala reception. Thursday's session included partner countries and organizations. Now, Russia has chaired BRICS since the 1st of January 2024. Now, the group has extended this year, taking on new members to grow in both size and influence, now covering nearly half the world's population and a third of the world economy. Now, at the same time, after the BRICS summit, Russian President Vladimir Putin responded to questions posed by journalists at a special press conference in Kazan. Now, President Putin has described the BRICS Plus Outreach Summit as a way for direct dialogue with countries of the global south. He said this format has proved to be its worth already and opens a path for direct and open dialogue between members of the association and friends and partners from the global south and east. The Russian president went on to summarize the result of the BRICS summit, including the adoption of the BRICS Kazan Declaration. Putin told BRICS leaders that the Middle East was on the brink of a full-scale war after a sharp rise in tension between Israel and Iran, though the Kremlin chief also faced calls to end the war in Ukraine. The BRICS summit, attended by more than 20 leaders, including Chinese President Xi Jinping, Prime Minister Narendra Modi from India, and Turkey's Tayyip Erdogan, has shown a depth of Russia's relations beyond the Western world. And coming back to Sri Lanka, the defense apparatus of Sri Lanka's military has met with the Prime Minister. A meeting took place at the Prime Minister's office between Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya and key defense officials, including Chief of the Defense Staff General Shavendra Silva, Army Commander Lieutenant General Vikram Lianage, and Navy Commander Vice Admiral Priyantha Pereira. Now, this marks the first meeting between the Prime Minister and the defense chiefs since her appointment. At the same time, Air Marshal Udeni Rajapaksa, who is the commander of the Sri Lanka Air Force, he is on an official visit to Pakistan and called on the General Shahir Shamzad Mirza. He is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee at the Joint Staff Headquarters in Rawalpindi. During the meeting, both sides had reiterated their commitment to enhancing bilateral security and defense collaboration. Earlier, before the discussions commenced, upon arrival at the Joint Staff Headquarters, a smartly turned out tri-services contingent presented a guard of honor to a commander of the Sri Lanka Air Force. Now, Sri Lanka Air Force has received a spy plane from Australia. The Australian government provided a Royal Australian Air Force surveillance aircraft, Beechcraft King Air 350, to the Sri Lanka Air Force on a gratis basis. The aircraft will expand Sri Lanka Air Force's aerial, maritime surveillance and reconnaissance capabilities and contribute to Sri Lanka's ongoing efforts in maintaining a peaceful and secure Indian Ocean region. Australia's grant of this aircraft to Sri Lanka emphasizes the strong partnership between the two nations and reinforces the joint commitment to combating human smuggling and enhancing regional stability. Well, that's a wrap of this morning's edition of the Breakfast Rundown with me, Zulfick Farzan. I'll meet you again, same time, same place next week, and have yourself a wonderful weekend.